Regarding Men, episode 38. When women buy sex, it's good.
Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to another issue of Regarding Men. And I'm Janice Fiamingo. I'm here with the wonderful Paul Elam, who is the creator of An Ear for Men and a Voice for Men, and with the equally wonderful, or perhaps even more wonderful,
Wait a
Tom
minute.
Golden.
You were doing
And-
retake.
Yeah, I was doing okay. Rewind.
No, go ahead. We like that one.
With the equally wonderful. Let's stick to that.
I like the
Tom
perhaps
Golden. And Tom, of course, is the creator of Men Are Good. And we're
Yeah, they
discussing an article today that was published a couple of weeks ago in the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's newspaper. And it's an article that doesn't believe men are good, although it doesn't talk about men very much. It talks about women, and its point is that women are good. And whatever women do is wonderful. And women can transform any industry, any activity, any endeavor, even things that feminists have up until now been pretty much uniformly negative about. They can transform it into something positive just by being involved. In this case, it has to do with buying sex. One would be hard-pressed to find an article by two feminist journalists celebrating the reasons that men buy sex. I think it would be impossible. We'd expect an article all about exploitation, abuse, dehumanization, objectification, men's need for dominance, men's tendency to see women as not fully human, etc. Now suddenly talking about women who buy sex, it's a whole different story. And this is an article by Anna Kelsey Sugg and Sasha Payne. It's called "A Growing Number of Women Are Paying for Sex and They're Seeking More Than Pleasure." Of course, women would never seek anything as crass as pleasure. And that's what the article is about.
Yes.
It is about how women are seeking sex with sex workers because they want to learn about their bodies, because they want to experiment with sex in a safe environment where they don't fear mockery, where the boundaries are clear. And there's an extensive interview with a person named Jocelyn, who it turns out at the end of the article is actually a trans woman, who says that sex workers have really helped her to heal from all sorts of trauma and discomfort with her body and herself. She says that sex workers helped her to feel much lighter, and this is a quote, and to, quote, clear out that stress in a way that conventional mental health practice probably never would have, or would have cost me a lot more time and money. So this person, we're told women in general, though there's no other women interviewed, talk about all of the healing that comes, the spiritual element, the holistic element of paying for sex. Again, it's absolutely unimaginable that we would ever have an article talking about how men use sex work for those reasons, though, of course, the question does arise, do men not also seek safe spaces for sex? Do men not also seek places where they are not going to be mocked, and where they can have pleasure and intimacy and the healing power of touch, etc., from prostitutes? So I'll open it up there, and we can talk about some of the strange contradictions of this article.
God, and there are many.
Oh boy.
One of the first things that I wondered about with this is there's the subtext of a lot of what's being said in this article is the implication that sex workers are providing these women something somewhat akin to a mental health service, or even better.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, what in particular are they alleging that they're getting from paid sexual encounters that are not available in any other sexual encounter? They say that they're, coming to understand their bodies better. Well, sex does that, but it does it whether you pay for it or not. So I'm just wondering, was there even, I couldn't find a single mention of here's what makes this unique, or here's what makes this better than sex that you don't pay for. And I found it totally wanting. It's like there's an assertion there that this is therapeutic in some way.
Yes.
And they offered no evidence, or even anecdotally.
Yes, that's a really good point, Paul, that they don't point out exactly what it is that is positive about the whole deal, but they do talk in the language of therapy. You know, they talk about healing, they talk about safe spaces, and it's like, you know, this whole thing is about, quote, healing, and then they say it's got a healing impact, and it's like, I read through the thing and I went, what? I mean, you know, what exactly are you talking about? And frankly, Paul, what you just said is part of what I was wondering. You know, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was it. It was like, okay, give me an example of the kind of healing you're talking about. And they never did. You know, they never did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got the sense that, I mean, Jocelyn, this trans woman, is the only person who's actually interviewed. There is a research fellow, Dr. Hillary Caldwell, who's also interviewed. But Jocelyn, I think at one point said, or maybe it was actually Dr. Caldwell who said that, you know, in a conventional relationship, there are, she suggested certain roles and expectations that come into play that would prevent somebody from really being able to fully explore their sexuality, and that if you're outside of a relationship, you're paying for sex in this particular kind of contract, that you can escape those expectations and sex roles in some way. So that was the only near concrete example.
Yeah, and I would question that.
Yeah.
I would question that completely
too.
You know, because in a good relationship, you can experiment with whatever you want, you know, just be honest and open and say, this is what I'd like to try. You do? Okay, well, let's try it, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, I think that's weak. That's anemic, you know?
I couldn't agree more, Tom.
It certainly did seem to me a good example of the fantastical double standards of journalism.
Yes.
Just whatever women do, we've got to describe it in positive terms. It would be, you know, even to write a kind of objective, balanced, somewhat positive, somewhat critical article about women and sex workers, even that is beyond the capacity of these journalists. It has to be celebrated. And the Dr. Caldwell, the researcher, is quoted at the end of saying, you know, anything that empowers women is a good thing. And, you know, and that's become the mantra of our times. And obviously these journalists think they'll just run with that. You know, the question is why? Why is it a good thing? Why? Well, how is it empowering, and why is it good for women to be empowered, and in what manner? But none of that is explored.
It's because women are wonderful.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Hey,
you know,
and rears its ugly head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do have to wonder what other things Dr. Caldwell might have said about sex work, because as you looked up, Tom, you know, you investigated who this person is, and she isn't only interested in women and sex. She's interested in the reasons that men buy sex as well, and what they feel they get out of it. She's quite non-judgmental. You passed along a webpage about her research with men. She's very interested in men's own narratives about, you know, what it means to buy sex, and you know, so she's kind of very dispassionately and empathetically interested in how people in general feel about sex work, and you know, so maybe she made that point in her interview with these researchers, but they only took out the women are wonderful and everything women do is healing and holistic and spiritual, etc. So yeah, we can't really know, but yeah, it is a very strange article in that way. And when I was just rereading it before we started talking about it, I came across this statement by the one person who's interviewed, who's called Jocelyn, although that's not a real name, who says that, quote, having the sex that is right for each person is, I won't say a right, but something that I think we can reasonably expect. An amazing statement, an amazing statement. If a man had said that, having the sex we deserve is maybe not a right.
Imagine if Donald Trump said that.
Yeah, yeah. What men should be able to reasonably expect.
Yes.
You know, you'd hear nothing but that, the danger of that, you know, how outrageous it is, the entitlement, the presumption, etc. You hear nothing about it for a year, you know, but somehow it just passes through. And I do think that right there, that sums up the blinders that are on these writers and our whole society. I don't know whether this article got very much pushback, but I don't think it did. And, you know, nobody else commented on it or how crazy its assumptions were. I went back to a piece that I often review by Andrea Dworkin. She talks about male supremacy, and she says that male supremacy means that there is a class of people there to provide you with what you need. In other words, women, you stay richer than they are, so they have to sell you sex. Not just on street corners, but in the workplace. That's another right that you can presume to have as a man, supposedly. Sexual access to any woman in your environment when you want. The statement is totally, damn.
Yeah, that's great. How do I get a hold of some of that?
How do I get me some of that? Yeah, I know. I mean, the statement, even on its own terms, is completely incoherent, because in an environment of true supremacy where you can get what you want, you would not be paying for the sex. I mean, she says two totally contradictory things. On the one hand,
who's controlling the sex? You know,
yeah, exactly.
Sex.
Who's controlling the sex? If men can get what they want, then they don't have to pay for it from women. That suggests that women have something that men value deeply, that they're willing to pay for it. And usually the seller is the one who has power in that particular marketplace. But anyway, you know, she doesn't explore those implications. But that was one of her harshest condemnations of men, that they pay for sex. They force women to sell them sex.
They force women to sell their bodies for sex. You know what really struck me as funny about a lot of this article, and it's the same phenomena I've seen with feminism for the past 40 years, is that there's this sort of false manufactured pride in something that's mundane and relatively uneventful. You know, you see an article in Salon, I can drive a car as good as any man, and the sisters are high-fiving each other because she drove the car all by herself. And I can tie my shoe as well as any man. Okay, another article for Salon, and the sisters high-fiving. She tied her shoe. Nobody helped her. She's empowered. And this is the same thing. I bought sex, and what this boils down to is women buying sex. Okay, women are buying sex. That's fine with me. I have no issue. It's not an event. I think it's particularly worthy of big notoriety or anything like that. But here they are, and they're taking a basic human instinct, which is to get off, paying for it, and then saying, oh, look at me. This is a political statement. This is an expression of how empowered I am as a woman. Woman, you bought a hooker. You bought a hooker. It's like, we're going to do a postgraduate studies in this now and have all kinds of celebrations, perhaps a new act in Congress to pass some laws about this. This is
maybe a holiday, a national holiday.
Absolutely. National Female Clientele of Hookers Day. It is, I wonder, isn't there like some real accomplishments, real important things that women are doing that are more worthy of discussion? You know, I don't see very often that much media coverage of women combat pilots. I mean, it's acknowledged, and sometimes it's over-acknowledged. But for the most part, the feminist narrative and the dialogue that we see in the media from feminists is about, I bought a hooker, I tied my shoes, I drove a car, I told him I didn't need his opinion, yay me. This is what the feminist movement represents, and this article is just another sad part of that to me.
You really put your finger on it, Paul. That
that's a good
that
point.
is so good. That's so right. Yeah.
That's good.
It's something that I often sort of feel when I'm reading these types of articles, and I've never heard articulated quite so precisely. But it does make sense though, because feminism, as we realize, isn't really about celebrating high achieving women. It's about destroying the family and destroying the pair bond between men and women, and thus destroying our society so that it can be transformed in this revolutionary way. And so anger at men and this kind of thing, the celebration of what doesn't really deserve to be celebrated at all, is precisely what feminism is more interested in. That's a really good point.
Yes, it is a good point.
What they value seems to be conformity.
Yes, and that's the female way.
That's what they're celebrating, is the conformity.
Yes. I wonder what percentage of female fighter pilots are, how many there are out there. I'd be fascinating to find out about female fighter pilots.
There's a few of them.
Yeah, and I bet few is the key word.
They're very few, but they're doing very well.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that.
From what I've read.
That's an article I'd like to read.
But you don't get any of this. And again, I don't think,
and I'm
against the idea of dwelling on accomplishments as women, because the presumption in that is that women can't do shit to begin with. Yeah. And that we need to pay special attention whenever they manage to tie their shoes. And to me, I would find that insulting.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, Paul, those female fighter pilots that are out there, I'll bet you $100 each one is really supported by all the men out there. The fighter pilots that are men,
absolutely,
they're supporting them 100%. Whereas you take men who want to become, stay-at-home dads, do they get supported? No. They're going to get gatekeeping. It's what's going to run right into,
If they can find a woman willing to accept that arrangement.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And they
well, the whole contract, the gender contract, if there is such a thing, has been broken by feminism. Men are always to encourage and support and celebrate and promote women.
Yes.
Women feel absolutely no interest in general. Of course, there are many individual women who don't feel that way, but as a sex, as a class, women are not encouraged to support and promote men or to encourage them in their endeavors. In fact, they're discouraged from doing so.
Yes. And the other thing that I noticed about this article is, wait a minute, why is it that more women have to buy sex these days? And I think a part of what the article is about, although they didn't point it out, is that there are women out there who are lonely, who are unconnected, who have had their day in their job, but now they're 40, they got nothing. They don't have a family, they don't have a husband, they don't have children, they've got a job that they're kind of bodie-o-do. They need sex, so they go buy sex. I think that's something that they didn't point out.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
The daggone reproductive rate in our countries has gone way down.
Yeah, it's the bottom's hit on it.
Although, do you know what country in the world has the highest reproductive rate?
It's not Japan.
Not Japan.
Israel?
Yes, that's exactly right. Huh? I think it's 3.5, something like that. They're very large families in Israel. The whole place is booming. The country has vigor. They're very nationalistic and into it, very different. And that's, in some ways, I think that's our only hope, is to move into a scenario like that. But I'm getting us way off the topic, aren't I? Women and sex.
It is a very, very interesting point that, is this a signal of loneliness?
Yes. Yes.
Of course, that's not even mentioned.
And a signal of not being connected with men.
Not being connected,
Yeah, they're just out there on their own.
Yeah, certainly.
They have to buy sex.
The number of single people.
By a prostitute, you don't have to really humanize the prostitute. I think it's different. I think there's women can still get sex by snapping their fingers. Was it Karen Strawn said that
maybe
at her age she could go into an average bar and meet 5 guys and 3 of them would be willing to go home with her. And I still think that is representative of the lives of most women. I think what may be at play here is that the basic relationship between men and women has been so tainted and damaged that prostitutes seem like a better option to both sexes in a lot of ways. Because I know a lot of men are just fed up and they're saying, fine, I'll just do hookers.
I wonder if there's any stats out there on increase in use of sex workers.
Well, the headline of the article said, promised that it was growing among women. Of course, we don't know what, they found that there was, 2 more women last year.
Exactly. It doubled. The number
And
doubled.
they didn't give us any numbers.
Of course, it was a feminist article. They didn't.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
The whole thing might be kind of a fluff piece. I have my doubts about it too. The fact that they could only find one woman to be interviewed made me wonder. I guess we could ask Dr. Caldwell and look into her research when it publishes it and to see the numbers. But I wondered about that too. And the other thing, of course, that's very interesting, certainly in the Canadian context, is how this might affect the application of prostitution law, because in Canada we've taken the extraordinary step, and I don't know, I looked up some did preliminary work on Australian law, which doesn't seem to be quite the same as Canadian, but in Canadian law it is illegal to buy sex.
Correct.
Although it is perfectly legal to sell sex, which leads to all sorts of bizarre incoherence. It is illegal to advertise sex. So if you are a website owner and someone advertises on your website, and you should reasonably have known that what they were advertising was prostitution services, you can be harshly punished under the law, but the person who advertised on your website selling their own sexual services will not be punished. It is also
no gender
illegal
discrimination there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and it's very clear. The bill, which is Bill C-36, it was passed into law in late 2014, comes right out and says that it is a feminist law. It says that it treats prostitution as a form of sexual exploitation that disproportionately impacts women and girls. Therefore, it is designed to protect the women and girls who are seen as the victims of prostitution, and to harshly punish and stigmatize the men who are mostly the ones who are buying sex. So it's crazy. It means that you can't profit from the sale of sex, but unless you're the person selling it.
Right.
So it means if you are married to a woman who is prostituting herself, selling her services, and she gives you some of her money and you use it to buy drugs or something, or to do anything, you can be prosecuted, but she cannot, because
the person seeking the services can be prosecuted.
Oh, of course, yes. Even communicating for the purposes, and if it's an underage girl, very, very harsh punishment. So you just slow down in your car and talk to somebody, you can go to jail, but
really?
the person selling the services is protected. So it's incredible. So of course here now, so what does this mean? If women are really a growing demographic, are Canadian women really going to be put into prison for communicating about
Somehow
buying sex?
I don't think so.
We'll change the bill.
Yeah.
Women can do it, but men
will
can't.
simply not prosecute the women.
That's what's going to happen. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. The police.
That's the way it's done in Sweden. In Sweden, it's the same style of laws as Canada.
Yes.
It's legal to sell sex and illegal to buy sex. They only prosecute men, and so far as I know, there hasn't been a single woman prosecuted ever for purchasing sex in Sweden. Right. And I doubt that there has been in Canada. This is pure, straight up gender bias.
Interesting.
In its raw form.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed.
So now they're even going to, guess what? You're going to go MGTOW because you're tired of putting up with the average woman shit in this culture. You'll just go MGTOW and hire prostitutes. Well, guess what? You'll go to prison for that too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we're going to control men's sexuality
Exactly.
in any way possible.
Yeah.
And women are to be let loose on the world to express themselves and become empowered.
No, to heal, Paul.
Oh,
to
yes, to
heal.
heal.
To
I forgot.
heal. Yeah, from their wounding by patriarchal society.
That's right. All those
Yeah.
patriarchal penises.
Mhm. It's
Indeed.
yeah, wow. Yeah, so we come back to the same place where we
Every
often,
time.
end, unfortunately, shaking our heads at
double
the
standards.
vicious double standards
It's crazy.
and the utter dehumanization of men.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
indeed.
really quite something.
Yeah.
So, so let's award our prizes then. Do we want to give out our humanitarian award first?
Yeah, I think we said Caldwell,
Yeah,
the
we thought
researcher. I looked into her research, and the very first thing she wrote was on men, and it was surprisingly really thoughtful and even-handed, and said some men go because of this and some men go because, it was very much similar to her article on women. I mean, she was saying that men go for support and for this and for that. It wasn't condemning at all. So yeah, good for you, Caldwell. You get the humanitarian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're going to give it to our two, we're going to give the PUTA to our two journalists here who've written such a ridiculous woman are good, or woman good, man bad kind of article. Oh, I loved it. The one last thing I forgot to say that I really wanted to say is that at the very end, when they were interviewing Jocelyn said that sex work has been stigmatized. Oh, I can't find it now. Oh, yes. Her experience demonstrates the value of an industry she believes is often maligned or misunderstood, particularly by what she refers to as a conservative, pale, stale, and male portion of the public.
Oh.
That's the only mention, really, of men in the whole article. And of course, pale, stale, and male, those are the ones that have supposedly stigmatized sex work, never feminists or anybody else. So yeah, the fact that these two journalists were unable to write an article with any kind of fair-mindedness or even recognition of men as human beings is all too typical, but still shocking and deserving of the PUTA, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. She'll be riding in no time with two heads.
Two
Mhm.
PUTAs. Those PUTAs.
Two putas. There she goes.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
So there we are.
And we've got some exciting news that's coming up pretty soon about the regarding Minsight. We're going to do some interesting things, and we'll be letting you know about that in the future.
Yes, we will. And,
Yes, we
in
will.
fact, I will give one hint out there
Uh-oh.
about what's coming. I've had people asking me for quite some time now to return to my monologues and my scripted videos, and I am going to be doing that, but you have to come to Regarding Men to see them. That's coming
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, man. Good deal.
Bravo.
That's
Sounds
good. So we done?
We done.
I think so.
We're
All right.
done. Another sex
Until
story
next
down the
time.
drain. That's right. Until next time, you all take care. We'll see you then.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.